The language formerly known as Perl 6 is Raku. You will often hear me say Raku instead. That doesn't mean you've been saying it wrong. Raku is slightly more correct. Rakudo is the compiler name. Raku is actually a word in Japanese, part of the tea ceremony. I'm Bruce Gray, util online. I've been working with Raku, for nearly 20 years. My wife, Sarah, is assisting with signals. We would not have this free class today without Jonathan Worthington's original version of this class and Patrick Mishaw's improvements to the slides. I've made many changes, but I was not going to tackle writing a whole Raku class until next year. But then they both offered to let me base this class off of theirs. So thank you, Jonathan and Patrick. This is to teach programming in Raku, not to teach programming, in Raku. Raku is a perfectly fine first language, but this class will only work for people who already know how to program in, well, any other language. We have 2.5 hours minus breaks. We can't come close to covering all of Raku in that time. I worked it out in my head. I think it would be over 20 hours if it was classroom, everybody does exercises kind of thing to cover all of Raku. So I'll be skipping a lot of cool stuff when it's unlikely to be useful to a beginner. But that still leaves a lot of cool stuff. Our focus is the core syntax, inescapable concepts like the type system and lazy lists, and a bit of how to think in the Raku way. Every so often, we will have try it and see slides. In Sched this morning, I finally did add links to how to get to places you can download Raku, or you can get them off the slides here. I have a window that should be working for, no, not that one, this one. That's too small, isn't it? Better? We're going to start out with the REPL. If you just say Raku and you don't say anything else, then it goes into a read, evaluate, print loop that is good for experimentation, little one-line expressions. If you type it carefully or type it in an editor and paste it in, that works too. And if we get to it, then we'll be doing full scripts in an editor. If you can't install locally, but you do have Docker, then those are the instructions to run it on Docker. Windows 2. And finally, I don't know if we're going to overload them. I guess this class isn't that big, but glot.io has allows you to just run it in your browser. And I want everybody to be able to hear me easily without straining. If my volume drops, please let me know. Somewhere in there it's supposed to talk about pair programming. Pair programming is encouraged, helping each other is encouraged. I will be taking questions throughout, but if there's something you think your neighbor can help you with, or if one of you has Raku installed and the other one doesn't, please take a moment now to offer to share your screen with your neighbor. We did this in 2015 and 2016, I was a volunteer helping out with audience, and the pair programming part worked just splendidly. So bonus experience if you've never gotten to do that at work. We'll start with values, not even variables yet, just values. Integers, whole numbers, positive and negative. Rationals. So that first number is 25 over 100, which gets reduced to 1 over 4, stored as numerator 1, denominator 4. Don't worry, they figured out how to do that efficiently. 5.05 is stored as 101 over 20. Now, you won't ever see it that way unless you asked to look under the covers. If you print it out, it'll say 5.05. But behind the scenes, rationals just silently do more accurate math for you. Curtis Poe has a over half-hour talk about all the classes of business problems that just vanish because of this. It's great. And we do have real floating point numbers like you expect to see IEEE 754. Scientific notation is our avenue into it. So these E's aren't just being funny, and these are all three the same number. It's not only a different way to express numbers, it is a way to declare that the number you've put into your source code is to be considered a floating point, which is convenient because whatever you've got, you can just put E0 after it and you don't have to do any math. Just now that's a real floating point. But don't, because rats are better. That's why we made it a little extra hard to get to this. The natural way you write it is the way that's going to work accurately and best for you. By the way, the trick from C and Python, several languages where they have to say like 5.0 to make something, force something to be a floating point. If you do that here, it's a rat. It's going to be 5 over 1. And the values, even without being stored in a variable, the values themselves have types. They know their types because they're objects. You can discover using all caps method what. This is our method call right here. Where Perl has dash arrow, we have dot. And these are the official type names for these types: int, rat, and num. I kept thinking that num meant numeric, but there's actually a role that is called numeric that means something that is a number kind of thing. Num is a floating point. We have the usual set of numeric operators. They're defined on all the numeric types you've seen. Those last two, modulus or remainder, and exponentiation, raising something to a power. So first, try it and see. By the way, how many people are going to be able to participate in the try it and see, either because you're sitting next to somebody or you have it on your own laptop? Great, great.
I missed the download slides, but
It's if you can get on Sked, you can download the slides, and the download slide is in the slides. How about that? No. Just, where am I?
I got it.
22, you got it? If you can't get to it there, sing out, because it'll make a huge difference in how much you're able to do. So, first one, how big an integer can you get? Take 60 seconds. See if you can overflow it. I couldn't overflow it, but I hung my computer. About 20 minutes later, it came to and told me the answer. Oh,
Star 99, star 99.
see me after class.
Bruce,
Yes,
maybe I've got the exponentiation operator. Oh, it's probably it's two stars.
it's
not
two.
Mary, right?
Right, it's 2 stars.
Good.
Oh, you did it 3 times. Yes, that will. Well done.
That'd be pretty big, I bet.
Yeah, there's a YouTube number file video about how we don't know if pi to the pi to the pi to the pi is rational or not, because it's too big to fit on our computers. Okay, so anybody want to share how? Anybody else want to share how big they tried it? We know this is a 64-bit machine, so we ought to be able to handle 2 to the 64. How about 2 to the 640? Ooh, how about 2 to the 6400? How about, let's just make it an even 100,000. Oh, I float off the screen. It was a 30,000 digit number, that fast. If you've used big int in Perl, big int is built into the ints.
I tried 9 to the 9 to the 9. It's still running. It has an overflow.
You can, oh yeah, if you don't know, Control C will get you out of infinite loop. We'll actually do that later. Where in Perl you would use length, we do not have length in Raku. It's specifically forbidden because it's too ambiguous. But we do have, tell me how many characters there are. Okay, what was the other one? What type do you get when you divide 2 integers? Anybody get that? Are you guessing or did you do it?
Obvious.
Is it well, okay, is it a rat even if it's 8 divided by 2, which is a whole number?
Is it though? Good question. Good point. I'm guessing yes.
Yes, because the slash operator is defined when it's operating on ints on both sides to return a rat. There is a way, there's a method called narrow that you can use to go the extra mile for the compiler to look and see, oh, can I turn that into an int? But normally you don't want to do that because you care about a little bit about your types if you get down below the ints. And anybody try 1/10 plus 2/10 equals 3/10? And tell me if I'm going too fast, if you'd like just a little more time for the exercise or.
Does the right thing align with us?
Well, let's dig into that. Thank you. Okay. Most notably, Devin tried 999 to the power of 999 to the power of 999 and did get an overflow. Well done. Okay. For this, I'm not going to do equals equals because different languages display true and false differently. I want to get more directly at the problem. If they're going to be equal, that means that the difference has to be truly 0. Not a tiny number, but truly 0. So if I subtract in Python from 3/10, whatever 1/10 plus 2/10 is, if I subtract that, we ought to get 0. We get almost 0, which makes it not equal, which is why there's whole papers on like, everything that a programmer needs to know about floating point. Well, what about Perl? Ooh, same problem. Raku descended from Perl, but we got that right because all three of those numbers are rats. In floating point, none of the three are round numbers. I mean, you can't get exact. You can do things like 1/2 or 1/4, but tenths never going to come out right in floating point, and we tend to use tenths a lot. Now, if I force Raku to use floating point, then I get some consistency there. As I said, whole class of business problems vanish. Things you don't have to worry about because rats do the right thing. I mentioned the Modulus Operator, which is provided by most languages. But commonly, you use it not because you care what the remainder is. Much more often, you just want to know, is A divisible by B? Evenly divisible by, I should say. And when you use modulus for that, the answer will be backwards because 6 mod 3 is 0, which is false. It's a common bug. You have to remember to do this, wrap it in parentheses, and compare that to 0. People forget that all the time. Also, it's wasteful because we don't care actually what the remainder is. We just want to know whether or not it's 0. So Raku has added a divisibility operator, a doubled %sign. It returns true or false, not a number, an actual true or false. Similarly, since you often do the division and throw away the remainder to round or whatever, that's not rounding, but you only care about even divisibility. We have a div operator. You were just talking about the slash int gives you a rat. Even if it could be an int, it's still a rat. Int div int is always an int. It will throw away the remainder. It's a very efficient operation. And if you try and div on other stuff, I think it just doesn't work. It's only defined on int. Raku provides all the numeric routines I hope you would hope for. One of them is round. If you need it, you should read the documentation on it. It does more than you think. It does more than I've seen in any other language. You can tell it to round to things like round to the nearest 1/3. It's really well thought out, really cool. But if you don't know to look, then you wouldn't know. All the trigs, including all the hyperbolic versions. The last row, we have complex numbers built in. I won't be getting into it, but they are built in. Okay, so in Perl, we had basically two worlds, strings and numbers, and then we had ways to easily move between them almost seamlessly without thought. But it really is two different things. You care in some times whether something's a string or a number. Well, we have strings too, of course. They have to be quoted in some way. Raku has no bare words. We have lots of quoting constructs. The two obvious starter ones are single quotes and double quotes. Double quotes have much richer abilities. Single quotes do less, so they're more appropriate for simple strings. It really is like a divide in the Perl world where some shops, some programmers say, if you don't need things like interpolation and more that double quoted strings can do in Raku, if you don't need it, then it should be single quoted. It's easier for the reader to understand. Don't look for anything magic that's happening in here. I'm in that camp. Other folks and some whole shops say double quote. Just know what the rules are for the double quoting, and even for single things, double quote, because it's just consistent and you don't have to worry about it. It just transfers where you worry, but that's equally valid. Quick example, double quoted strings process backslashes to mean what we usually mean them to mean. If I single quote \t, I get a backslash character followed by a t character. In double quotes, I get those two get converted into a real tab. We'll see doubled things having superpowers beyond double quoted strings later on. I mentioned we use dot as method call, which means we can't use it for string concatenation. We use the tilde for string concatenation. How to remember it, like stitching two things together. Also, it kind of looks like a piece of string. So try it. What happens if you try and do something that you just concatenate two strings and you use the dot? And what happens if you don't put an operator there at all? In C, that works. They just make a long string. While you're doing that, I'm going to remember to take a picture of the class. Anybody need more time? Thank you, Sarah. Let's see, did I get that on a slide? Yeah. So, we're proud of this kind of thing. If you use a dot, we know our history. We came from Perl. This is a change from Perl. So the error message, without saying Perl, knows what you're probably trying to do. Unsupported use of dot to concatenate strings. In Raku, please use tilde. And the error message shows in green, it was working up to that point, and it points out that point, and it's bad past there. Our community is very proud of error messages. The back end of how parsing is done with grammars and other stuff I won't get into allows us to have a better understanding of possible alternate parsings that didn't work. And so we have a lot more information at the point of the error to tell you what you might have meant. And so we've been putting in lots of very informative error messages. And in fact, we take it so seriously that there is a category of bug with the Rakudo compiler, LTA. Anybody know what that means? Less than awesome. If an error message is less than awesome, we consider that a bug. Similarly, if you leave out the operator, it gives you an error 2 terms in a row. Say, all right, you need a term after that. There's a term. Now there's got to be something else. It's got to be one of these. I won't go into what all these are, but it's definitely not 2 terms in a row. Say it again, please. Oh, the numeric operators. Yes, thank you.
Yes, what happens?
No, I got to repeat it for the camera too. Yeah. The question is, what if we try and add strings? Because there are languages where plus is overloaded, and in Raku, as in Perl, the numeric operators do numeric coercion. So it'll take the string on the left and try and turn it into a number. If it can't, it will throw an error, and then it'll do the same thing with the one on the right. And if it can turn them both into numbers, then you're golden. Because it might have been perfectly valid that they were both strings.
Will those numbers usually be like the code point or something?
No. It's got to be like, I think a slide did not make it into this on it. The question was, will it try and turn a string into a code point? No. I mean, it really tries to make sure you meant it's a number. So if you've got white space, 5.3 white space, that's okay. I know a bank that got in trouble because NAN is technically a number, and so they were expecting that to reject, and it didn't. But even if you got 5Z, it'll say, hey, the whole thing wasn't a number. So there's actually a ticket open on what the heck is the infix stopper? But I won't go into that. Here are some common operations on strings. I don't have the slide with all the string operations, but we got function calls, uppercase, lowercase, title case, then lowercase. We have title case too. Substring, so this will go to the 0, 1, 2 character and give me 3 characters. And cars is our equivalent of length. You can omit the parenthesis when everything to the right is an argument. You're used to doing that in Perl, but there's actually a syntactical rule for how that works now. Anybody prefer the parens? It depends on what else I'm doing, yeah. If you're chaining things, there are also method forms. Even if you do no object-oriented design, you don't have any classes in your program, that kind of thing, you'll probably use method call syntax often. It just starts to feel natural really quick. Yeah. Especially the substring, where you can say there's what you're operating on and then just the parameters, the operation that you're doing to it. That feels more natural to me. Remember I said we don't have length? Well, since Unicode began, Perl has always had the premier Unicode support. Raku improves on even that. Every string inside Raku is a Unicode string. We can encode and decode representations on disk or in memory to other things, but you don't call it a string anymore. If it's in Raku and you're calling it a string, it's Unicode. Unicode has this concept of levels. Graphemes are things, the actual characters like you would draw. Code points, which are the codes that represent that could be multiple code points because some things are combining characters, and bytes, the actual byte for byte, what ends up on the wire. We have ways to support all 3 of those, but almost always, if you're not doing Unicode geekery, what you want is grapheme level. And that's what Raku always does if you don't tell it different, is operate at the grapheme level, because that's human level. So that's brulee. We're burning things. There was supposed to be a joke there about that. So this is the actual hex codes for each of those characters. But cars will say 6, not 8. We have real, true, and false values. They are of the type bool, like Boolean. And all the types know how to boolify themselves. You know, we had in Perl, if you put something in an if, like if this hash or if this array, what does that mean? We've codified those kind of rules. Everything knows how to return its true or false value. Like an array doesn't return false if it's empty and true if it's not empty because the language says so. It's because the array was defined with that boolification method. You can ask them about this with the question mark operator, or ask them the opposite of that with the bang. And just like we have in Perl, high precedence and low precedence version of and or, there's actual word and, but there's also the ampersand ampersand. We have low precedence versions of boolification, so and not. And that's because of like children arguing. Is not, is so, is not, is so. That's where that's from. It works great linguistically. It just works in your program. And these are, the question mark and bang are two of our coercion operators. Remember I mentioned a little while ago, plus as a infix operator with something on the left and right coerces to numeric. Well, sometimes you want to coerce to one of the basic types without an infix operator. So we have specific coercion operators. As I just said, we have question mark or so and bang or not for Boolean. Plus is numeric. Minus is negated numeric. And tilde, you saw tilde earlier to concatenate, but tilde just is in front of something turns it into a string. Oh, I knew there was a slide on this. If you nullify a string that doesn't contain a valid number, I'll tell you about failure in a second. But so this works. It's fine with the white space there, but 5, wow, cannot convert string to a number, trailing characters after number. That's where the trailing characters start. I don't have a good way to explain this, but we have a couple of types of runtime errors. There's what you're used to, which is something happens and you get a warning, or something happens, scratch the warning, something happens and your program dies. There's a deferred version of that called a failure, where you divide by 0 and assign that to a variable. It doesn't do I have exercise in that? It doesn't immediately die. The failure object goes into the variable, and then when you use the variable, then it signals the error to you, which may be too subtle for beginning, but it's useful sometimes behind the scenes in constructing how you want your class or your module to communicate with the user. Okay, so what string values are true or false? Try and guess and then actually try it. This is troublesome. I can't show you this and my REPL at the same time. Okay, and before I show you that, because of that complication, what types do you get with these? And be careful, because what binds tighter? So if you say plus this dot what, it will run a dot what on all this part and then nummify it. So you need parens around the whole thing, dot what. Pardon? Well, the precedence levels have been tweaked. The comment was, it seems a little controversial. They have been tweaked, but there is the waterbed theory of complexity. There are trade-offs that have to be made. It's generally improved even over Perl's already excellent choice of precedence levels, but yeah, there are tiny gotchas. And finally, what do you think true and false would nummify to? So, somebody tell me, what did you get? Is the empty string true? The empty string is false. That's the way it is in Perl too. How about string 0? Did you try it? Oops. Oh gosh, it's not going to let me cheat. All right. Oh, I'm sorry. My brain was backwards. I was all in Perl for a moment. This is one of the weird things that they changed from Perl that I thought I disagreed with, and then later I changed my mind. In Perl, string 0 is just as false as numeric 0. And that's a source of bugs sometimes. And in Raku, the only string that is false is the empty string, which at least is consistent. It's less to remember.
Yeah, question mark plus quote 0 will give you false. No, question mark plus quote 0.
Oh, yes. If you nummify it first, actually, I remember Patrick doing this exact same thing. If you want the Perl kind of behavior, then you just put a plus in front of it, and now it works. And of course, nobody fell for the string false, because it's just a string that happens to have 5 letters that assemble the word false. If I use the Boolean value of false, well, false is false. Pardon?
I should hope so.
Okay, quickly, what types did we get for this one? Int. 1.5. No, don't tell me what it should be. Tell me what you got. And num. Int, rat, and num. How about, pardon?
Why is it float?
Why isn't it float?
Yeah, why is it called num instead of float?
I don't know. The question is, why is it called num instead of float when we call it floating point everywhere? Yeah, I don't know. What do true and false nummify to? 1 and 0, which is what I would hope, and is occasionally useful. Okay. Raku is an operator-rich language, so it's helpful to learn to recognize the 3 most common kinds of operators and think of them with official terms. Exponent op is infix. That is a infix operator. It's got something on the left and right that it operates on. That's the equivalent of calling something like raised to a power with 5 and 2. In some languages, you have to do this. In Java, you have to do that if you get into the right types. So these are both infix operators, because it's in the operator. No, it's in between the operands. That's it. This plus and this, so that, and that, the ones in green are all infix. And that, is that blue showing up? That's a plus sign. That's a prefix operator. It only takes one argument or one operand and it's on its right. That's the numeric coercion operator. How does Raku know that it's not addition? Thank you, Sarah. Because of its position. I talked earlier about two terms in a row. In the syntax, it's well defined, although not well understood by me yet, of what every slot in the syntax has as a possible next element. And here, that plus does not have a term on its left. So it must be the prefix operator, not addition. It's all syntactic sugar for subroutine calls, but it's sugar that we want. It's really tasty. I hate working like that in languages that require it. There's also postfix operators, but we'll see those later. And this is marked consider skipping, but there is this very dramatic periodic table of the operators from in the first few years of Perl 6 before we renamed. It's not 100% up to date, but it is really impressive. And you don't have to learn all that stuff. You probably know a lot of it, like already. There's the math. There's our numeric comparators. I think it's fun. There's a lot of consistency there, hence the periodic table nature. On to variables. Well, actually, that might be the time. Sarah says we've got 5 minutes till the break, which we don't have to take breaks. 2 minutes till the break. We don't have to take breaks, but I think it's a good time to take a break. And if anybody wants to stick around, I'll answer questions or help you get Raku installed for the next 10 minutes. And everybody else, thanks for sticking with me so far. 10 minutes. Yes, sir.
Just for curiosity, I was trying to get gigantic numbers, see how big I could get. I did 9 to the 9 to the 9 and it never came back. 7 to the 7 to the 7 took about 10 minutes and produced a 700,000 character.
So 9 to the 9 to the 9 never came back. 7 to the 7 to the 7 produced how many characters?
Almost 700,000.
700,000 characters. Wow. How long do you think it took?
5 minutes.
5 minutes. That's yeah.
But so 7 to 7 to 7, 8 to 8 to 8, and 9 to 9, like those all tried, but I gave up on the bigger ones. 10 to the 10 to the 10 immediately says it's over.
10 to the 10 to the 10 immediately says overflow. 9 to the 9 to the 9 tries, but you didn't wait it out.
I wasn't
Sensibly, yeah.
I tried 2 to the 9th of the 9th.
Mm-hmm.
That hung, and I didn't wait to finish. 2 to the 10th of the 10th immediately said yes, overflow.
Okay, 2 to the 9th to the 9th hung. Well, it was working on it. It's not hung. It's actually it would eventually give you the answer. 2 to the 10th to 2 to the 10th to the 10th immediately said overflow. Good to know. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And when you say overflow, is it saying INF?
Get the syntax. It says numeric overflow in block L.
Oh, okay. It throws a numeric overflow exception. That's useful because we do have an inf type or an inf value that is numeric. Cool. That's good to know.
Yeah, it might just know enough that that's just going to be too big of an exponent. It doesn't bother. There's more bits in the universe, or there's more atoms in the universe, or fewer atoms in the universe.
Yeah.
Something like that. Oops. Clearly, you're going to have to keep it at this point. I can go for it.
I watched back Patrick's recording of this when he did it, the shorter version of it in 2016, I guess, in Orlando, and nobody came up with let's try exponentiating twice. Bit of evil. So congratulations, you all.
I said time record minus the say 7 to 7 dot cars, 695,975 characters.
Okay,
2
say
minutes and 55 seconds.
7 to the 7 to the 7th
7 to 7 to the 7.
is over 600,000 characters.
695,900.
695,000 and some odd. A lot.
Who knows if faith today will ever come back? Why? Theoretically, I guess it could eventually, but it might take years.
So I suppose the maximum is in an operating system.
Probably depending on RAM, right?
Yeah, well, no, that's going to be dependent on swap.
Okay.
I mean, ultimately.
How about virtual VM,
memory.
shall we say? Virtual memory availability.
Yeah.
The total process size possible, right?
Well,
Yeah, it's using a multi-precision math library behind the scenes. And so that's why it can be efficient below certain numbers. It doesn't have to have like big int calculations all the time because the library will have some optimizations in for it. But those libraries should be good for, up to your virtual memory.
yeah, I mean, part of it's going to depend on the native process and things. So,
But then having said that, I don't know why y'all are getting a numeric overflow. I don't know if
There's
that,
a shortcut in there that basically says this is way too big.
but it
I wouldn't be surprised if like if the exponent is less than 100 in the try.
yeah,
It's 100 or more.
maybe it's based on the size of the exponent. Actually now I want to dig in and look at the math library and see what's triggering it.
So I just tried 2 to the 99 and it's trying.
Okay, 2 to the 99th is trying. That actually works with both parsing of that sentence.
Well, hell, 2 to the 100th power is only like 20, 30 digits or something. That's not fast compared to these other ones.
Wait, maybe I misheard. Did you say 2 to the 99th?
That comes back.
Yeah, that should be really fast.
Because 10 to 10 to 10 is 10 to 100, right?
No, but what I heard you say is just 2 to the 99th, like that.
Yeah. I've tried 10 or 2 to the 100.
That's just double it. So I don't know what you tried, or what I.
That busts my theory.
Okay, yeah.
It comes from the right.
Yeah,
So it
it's right.
evaluates-
It's right associative.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, if you dig into the Raku source code, Rakudo source code, that's the compiler name. There's besides the precedence levels, there's also associativity for every operator.
And you can define your own operators and set the associativity.
Yes, yeah, and you can define your own operators and set the associativity and set the precedence. And what's
I can make my own PHP ternary?
I'm not familiar enough. The question is, can I make my own PHP ternary? I'm not familiar enough with what PHP might get wrong about that. Oh, great. You mean like worse than JavaScript?
Yeah, well, I don't know what JavaScript does with it, but PHP, you have to parenthesize it if you want to chain them together, or else it does the wrong thing.
Yeah, that's JavaScript does
It's
that.
not associated by default in PHP.
Oh, well, you'd have to use different characters, but yes, you could. Different characters than Raku uses.
You can do a ternary with Raku, do it right now because it has 3 operands.
Okay, Daniel's saying he thinks that the 3 operand ternary may be special cased and that you can't create an because we actually have different
Oh,
categories. We got infix, prefix, postfix, and things like circumfix, where,
Ternary classification can you create it?
right, I don't know if there's a ternary classification. That's a good point. Again, haven't looked at that.
I think that's right. I did look at that at one point, unless it's changed.
So we'll start back in 2.5 minutes. Is that right?
Would that be deconstructed into a pair of infix operators perhaps, or would that not really work?
Would that be deconstructed? Wait, hold on.
Could you implement it as two infix operators to make a ternary without not even really be parsable that way?
From what Daniel's saying, I think not parsable, but
Yeah, I think you get this short circuiting. Would you end up evaluating?
Yeah, that's short circuit. I could imagine you might be able to do it if you return some sort of object that you will leave evaluation to do the short circuiting.
Yeah.
You could probably include that.
It wouldn't be as clean as the other operators you can define.
But is the built-in ternary the only thing that can take more than two arguments as an operator?
I thought maybe it's even one new circumfix, which takes one, unitary, unitary postfix, both take one, infix takes two, circumfix, which is like array indexing. You do like curiosity item, open bracket, something, close bracket. Yes, that still takes two.
Seems like they're all
Yeah, I think so.
Well, ternary already feels kind of special.
there's stuff in the spec, in fact, the original synopsis number 9 is on that, and it projects some stuff in there that implement on things like deeper matrix work and that kind of thing, and it just didn't make sense to we have syntax for it, but we don't have anything behind the syntax. And so that means that when it gets implemented by somebody like Steve, then it can be syntactically coherent with what we currently have instead of just being like calls I was talking about. But no, not well. There was a question about vector math, and I'll just say that we do have hyperoperations, which can do parallelized multiplication, but it'd be like dot operator kind of things. If you want matrix multiplication, that would need to be a library that you call. That's not built in. We have complex, but that's as complex as we get. Does everything work on complex the way you would expect it to? Almost. The thing that trips people up who are expecting it to work a certain way is if you ask for the square root of 1 as integer, square root of -1, integer -1, square root of it is I, a complex number. But you won't get that in Raku. You have to deliberately go into complex numbers by putting I in the number. So if you start out with -1 plus 0i, should be the same number, but it's a complex -1. And you take the square root of that, you get I. Time to start? Okay. I thought somebody else was coming up. Oh, yeah, Mike, but that's all right. He knows about variables. Now you will too. Variables. A scalar variable holds a single item. It has a $sign sigil, a dollar sigil. Like Perl, Raku uses leading punctuation characters called a sigil as a noun marker. That Larry, his background is linguistics, so we've got like concepts of nouns and verbs. Variables are nouns and subroutines are verbs. Makes sense. Once I was told that, it made sense. It never occurred to me before that. So dollar means it's a singular noun. Plural nouns will come later. But this code won't run because variables must be declared before they are used. Like Perl strict mode is always on. We declare with my. So that'll work. The scalar is the basic model that they teach in school. Think of it as a box with a name written on it. This one's name is answer. And we can change what's in the box. When the change is based on the old value, we can shorten it with minus an op equals, in this case, minus equals operator. By the way, every infix operator has a ops equals version of itself. And later, when you define your own operators, if it's an infix operator, Raku will automatically generate the op equals version for you. If you look in the Rakudo source code, you will not find that. It is automatically generated because the minus is a infix. So now 37. We can also define and initialize at the same time. Notice that answer and age are declared just the same, my, but they hold different types because a scalar, you can put anything in a scalar unless you declare it as having a type. So we have been talking about the types of values. Now we're talking about giving a type to a variable. Those are two related but separate concepts. So, if I do this, is it going to divide speed by 2 and round it down or round it up? I've declared speed holds an integer. Any theories? Try it, please. Well, okay, similar exercise. You try it. This is getting a little disjointed now. Just try assigning, straight assigning 5.5 to age, or any other type that's not int, something you declared int. Also, if you declare it to have a type and don't set a value, what's in the variable? You can have a look with .raku. That method is sort of like data dumper in Perl. It will try to produce Raku code that would evaluate to the value that's actually being referred to. And it's a great way to debug or just to understand what you're looking at. And then same question, but what if it's an untyped scalar? So assigning in violation of type, and what is an uninitialized typed variable hold, and what is an uninitialized untyped variable hold. That should just take you a minute. So having done that, I'll address what you're seeing bit by bit. But going back to that slide, the original question, does it round up or round down? No, it fails. Type check failed in assignment to speed. Expected int, but got rat. You can coerce. Raku will enforce. That took me a while to get used to. I needed somebody to say it exactly that way. You can coerce. Raku will enforce. Raku might also optimize based on knowing what type a variable must be at that point. Or it might not, but it will always enforce it. It will yell if it tries to obtain a value that isn't compatible.
Even if it's like you try to assign to like a 2 as a string, it won't do it.
Right. That would be coercion.
It's coercion.
The question is if you try to assign string to an int. No, not even if it could, it clearly would work if it was just not a string. No, it will not coerce. It will fail. You have to coerce it if you want it to. Now, just between y'all and me, there is a way to doubly declare something so that it can automatically coerce but
Is there like a method call to explicitly coerce it? Or you have to use the right operator?
is there a method call to explicitly coerce it? You can absolutely always use a method call to coerce it. Besides the operator of plus or tilde, you can call .num or .stir in mixed caps to do those using method calls instead. And that's the way I would say to go, because
You can do quote, 2 quotes on int, and that doesn't.
say it again.
If you do the 2 in quotes and then put dot int, that doesn't work. Of course, then there's that.
Yeah. Yeah, because an empty string would become an int as a 0, if I understood you right.
Not just like a 2 in quotes or something.
Oh, 2 in it. I thought you said 2 empty quotes. Okay. So the point I was just trying to conclude with is there is a way to get around this now, and this bugged me when I first started running into type restrictions. And I encourage you not to use any automatic coercion. If you're using the type system, just get used to you have to coerce at certain points because the type that you want it, the type that you've got is not the type that you want. So you do whatever to make it. I had to learn it that way, and now when the automatic coercion comes in, I don't use it as a crutch. I use it as an API consideration in a subroutine. It's advanced, and you should leave it as advanced instead of a way to get around what feels like a pain point right now. That pain is actually Raku encouraging you to do something you should have been doing all the time with considering what types might be coming at you. Yes?
Can you expound on the philosophy, or maybe you don't, you can't, of why sometimes things are auto-coerced and sometimes they aren't? Like if you are using an infix plus operator.
Why are some things coerced and some things not? Yeah, I'll expound on that a little bit because that's specifically what you asked for, and that might mean I'm skipping over or going less into a future slide.
We can do this offline.
Well, no, it's something I considered actually making several slides on, but I'll be brief because I'm not sure I can speak at Larry's level on it. This is a very deliberate design decision that goes back into Perl. And it's one of the reasons why we're an operator-rich language, besides the fact that he recognized how wretched saying multiply as a subroutine kind of thing is. There are times where the operation that you're executing, it matters whether you're dealing with a string or a number. And all the time when you're not dealing with the right thing, it's a pain in all the other languages to put, like in Python, to have to put stir around something that you're going to print. Okay, you're going to let, anyway. So, and also it's a huge source of bugs to have the operators overloaded to where the plus sign in some languages, it will concatenate if it's got strings, and it will add if it's got numbers. So you, as the reader of the program, have to know what is in that type on both operands to know what the operator you're reading is going to do. It's bad. It's just bad. So the design decision is that because this is such a big divide, when there are operations, including some methods, that are string operations, it doesn't matter what it is. It doesn't matter if it's an object. You invoke that operation and it coerces to string. If you're doing a mathematical, a numeric type of operation, it coerces to number. And there's a shortfall of geronicity in between that in Perl. You'll see that when we get to comparisons. That's where it becomes crystal clear. Sometimes it is important to be able to say, this thing is going to do the right thing depending on what type, and I don't have to know what type got passed in. I want to do different things depending on the type. And we have generic equivalents of a couple of operators for exactly that reason. So I guess the bottom line philosophy behind it is strings and numbers are different, and numbers can be in strings, and that's a problem. So how can we write something so that it's clear to the reader as well as the writer what the intention is and what is going on? When, especially in Perl, where there aren't string types and number types. So you can't even know, you can't even inspect it to know. That answer it enough? Okay. And yeah, talk to me at the bar kind of thing. A little louder, please. If you don't have a type on the variable, then the assignment of the variable doesn't do anything. It's a scalar. It can only hold one thing. If you're trying to pass it multiple things, it will do something special for that. But a scalar holds a thing. You give it a thing, it's not going to try and do something to the thing. In fact, even the multiple things, it just considers the multiple things a thing and assigns that. If you assign 3 things, it says, oh, you've got a list. That's a thing, and the list goes in. You'll see that more later. The question was about it seeming like if you don't have a type on a variable, it's coercing. But it's not coercing, it's not generic, it's nothing. It's not declaring anything about types, so it's not enforcing anything about types. So I can say numeric, not num, but numeric there. Numeric's a role. We won't get into roles just yet, but just think of it as an overarching, think of rat and int and all those as being subtypes or subclasses of numeric. If I declare it's numeric, then it's fine for it to hold an int, and it's fine for it to hold a rat later. This will work. This code will not blow up. Pardon? Well, yeah, I'm hand-waving over actually what numeric and children, but the question is that true for complex too? I don't know off the top of my head. Trap, I keep on writing num instead of numeric when I need to do that, and it's completely wrong. So the point is, it doesn't have to be that type. It can be something that is So it's a subclass or something that does, meaning it implements a role of the wanted type, and it'll work. Okay, for the record, there was a section here on how that box model I described really works under the covers in Raku, and I decided it does explain binding, but there's a better way to explain binding, and it just confuses people how this works under the covers, so skipping it. Okay, so those were all scalars. One thing. An array is an ordered collection of scalars. Ordered. The easiest way to get one is to just use an @ sign as the sigil in front of the variable. So this is a new sigil. We had $, there's a singular noun marker. @ will be a plural noun marker. When you assign to such a thing, I don't want to get into the depths of this, but if the equal sign sees that it is not a scalar on the left, but a list, that actually changes the precedence of the equal sign slightly. And that was done just so we don't have to have parens on the right-hand side, the way we do in Perl. In college, they taught us to think about like a line of those variable boxes, but with just one label on the whole line. In Raku, the key idea is positional. That's an important word. You'll hear it again. Our arrays, like Perl's, are mutable and dynamic, which means you can change any particular element, and the array as a whole is not fixed. It can grow as needed and shrink on, no, it can grow on demand and shrink on command. That's it. There is an immutable version of this. That type is a list. In Perl, list was just kind of a fuzzy concept and a context. We actually have a type. I don't have an example, but there's a type called list. Lists you can't modify. They're frozen. Arrays, completely mutable, completely dynamic. Lists, no, lists don't have a sigil for them. The sigiled form is an array. You can have arrays, they don't have to go into @ signs. Sort of like you can put in Perl square angle brackets to do an anonymous array constructor and put that in a scalar. So you could have a list in a scalar, but if you try to assign a list into an array, then it just populates the array, and then you got mutability again. If you want to do that, you want to assign it to a scalar. So the type of the variable is array. It's got 4 elements in it. Elims is the way we get to that. If you want to access part of it, just like Perl, we're using square brackets as the indexer. In this case, single elements. One change from Perl, if you are indexing backwards from this end, Perl, you just say -1, -2, and in Raku, you have to put a star. I'm not going to go into why that is. Just believe that it's for the best, even though it's a pain if you're working in both languages a lot. Next year, if I do this class again, I'll have a better explanation for the whatever star and how that's working there. We'll just say it's going to, one of the things it does is it enables you to declare one of those matrices with negative indexes, like go from -5 to +5 instead of 0 to 9 or 10 or whatever that is. If you assign to an element that does not already exist, then the array is extended. So this is 0, 1, 2, 3. If you assign to 4, elements went up by 1. Does that make sense? You can refer to multiple elements at once, like this. And you can do it on the left-hand side. So this is going to swap what's in positions 1 and 2. Something I did not get on this slide, I did when we get to hashes. In Raku, no, sorry. In Raku and Perl, if you're doing multiple things here, multiple things there, you use an @ sign. But in Perl, that would be a $sign. Thank you, Sarah. The sigils vary in Perl. Sigils are invariant in Raku. You're welcome to come in. So after we swap those two, we can ask for all three. That was supposed to be taken out because you don't know about ranges yet. I'm skipping that. Okay, we've been initializing countries, doing that, but they're all single words, so we could also use the word quoting syntax to make it easier on the eyes. Items will be divided by white space, just like Perl's QW, but without the QW. Why doesn't the compiler see that angle bracket right there as a less than sign in comparison? Same reason we were talking about the plus being coercion versus addition, because of where it is in the syntax. There's no term in front of it. So that's the start of quote words. What if we wanted to spell out United Kingdom instead of saying UK? Well, that's going to break everything. We're going to have United as the first country and Kingdom as the second country. So do we have to go back to our original form with quoting everything? No. Just like we've got single quotes and then double quotes are more powerful, we've got quote words and quote words, which are more powerful. They're so powerful that you can embed single quotes in them, and it understands that, oh, don't consider that white space to be a word separator. It's just part of this string. So this does what we want it to do, which I have wanted so many times in Perl. I see some of you agree. Thank you. And there's a Unicode spelling of that too. I've not needed it much, but when I did, it was perfect. And it felt intuitive. I didn't even have to remember exactly what the rules were for inside the double. No, just type what you think works. It worked. At least it did for me. That's not supposed to be there. Okay. You can, on an array, there are 4 mutating methods that you may be familiar with. Push and pop operate on the end. Push pushes a value on, pop pops it out. Shift work and unshift work on the head to take one off or put one on. If you only use push and pop and never code these, then you've created a queue, a stack. We don't need a separate type for that. You just use it like that and it's a stack. If all you use is shift and push, then you've got a queue. No special type needed. I don't have a slide for it, but what's become very useful with arrays and lists and sequences, and just because we have laziness in infinite lists, is head, skip, and tail. If I say whatever this array is, dot head with 2 in parenthesis, it will give me the first 2 elements. If I say skip 3 dot skip 3 dot head, then it will skip these 3 and give me just this 1. Skip, head, and tail all default to 1 if you don't tell it different. And if I say if I say tail 2, then it would just give me those 2. Skip and head are fantastic for working with infinite lists without collapsing the infinity into, taking up all your memory. Tail, less so. So everybody got this. Zen masters of it, no problem. Can answer any question. I'm seeing nods. Okay. And a smile. So just from I, and then you can type it in if you want to. I'd abbreviate if you do. That's my array declaration. The Disney phonetic alphabet. If I execute that line, what is in Disney afterwards? Whatever it is you think, firm it up in your head before you try it, and then I guess some of y'all are trying it. How's my volume? Just so-so? Too low? Okay. Not even so-so. Should I give you a minute more? Give it a minute more. Okay, they're almost there. I'm going to peek. Oh, I didn't put it up there. I'll just have to tell you. So the answer I get is Ariel, Belle, Cinderella, and then the last one is Eeyore, Dumbo run together. The first time I read through, I had Dumbo, Eeyore together in my head, but that's wrong. It's Eeyore, Dumbo. Any questions before I move on? Okay, we're only doing the first 2 of these. So if you declare an array and you assign something to element 0 and 3, what's in the middle 2? And how many elements do you have? Actually, let's just do the first 1, because that's something I'm not willing to explain right now. I think I have a dangling, I don't even know the term. I think there's something I referred to and had you think about and said we'll talk about it later, and we didn't, about what is a type, what's in a variable before you assign to it, if it's typed and if it's not typed. Did y'all try that? I think that was supposed to be down as something for me to try here. Okay, so, all right, let's do this first, then we'll jump back. If I've got an array and I assign to 0 and 3, I can't see that on this screen. I have to look over there as I type, and I can't touch type. So, oh, and .elms on it. So there are 4 elements because as soon as I assigned to element 0, it became 1 element, and then I assigned out here, and it had to fill in because we don't have sparse arrays. What's in there is any, which is sort of like what we used to call undef in Perl. I say sort of because I know it just said it's any, but I want to be explicit. I didn't say that earlier. The REPL, if you do something that has a value as its result, it will try to show you the value even if you don't ask for it. But I don't think it's a good habit, so I try to always not rely on it. So I have a untyped variable. I haven't assigned to it. It holds any. No. So what's happening here? In Raku, we have multiple types of undef. And any type, if it's just what we call a type value, which is normally represented by the type name surrounded by parens. The type values are all types of undefinedness. Is that even a word? And the most generic untyped undefined, almost, is called any. So whenever you see any, it means you're seeing undef without a type. And if you see one of the types, it usually means you're seeing undef, but typed. Technically, there is an even more undef value called mu, mu, which is the root of the entire object system. But we don't need to go there. There are like 15 clever jokes I could make right there, but no time. Okay, questions about any of that? Moving from arrays, where everything is ordered and indexed by position in that order, we go to hashes, where nothing is ordered, and indexing is by string. Quick story, in college, I saw a new library book on the language Snowball. Not COBOL, Snowball. The first page said that Snowball has only one data structure. The whole language is based on this new thing called a hash, where you can, at high speed, look up values by their string key. And I said, who would want that? And put the book down. True story. Follies of youth. Very powerful. Think in-memory database. And yes, it is possible to have gotten to a Perl conference and never used a hash. I talked with a sysadmin a few years back who had been doing sysadmin in Perl 7 years, knew regexes, asked me to sit down and explain hashes to him, never used them. Easiest way to get a hash is to make a hash variable, parallel to the array discussion earlier. But now we need a new sigil. Percent sign, just percent. So dollar is singular, Both @ sign and percent are plural. They're just different kinds of plural. We can initialize with a flat list or with a list of key value pairs. Have we talked about pairs? We haven't. We need to, don't we? Okay. Nobody was shaking their head violently. In Perl 5, the operator, that operator right there, spelled equals right arrow, we call it the fat comma because it acts just like a comma with the slight benefit that it quotes whatever thing is on the left. In Raku, we may still sometimes call that fat comma out of habit, but it is a pair constructor. It still quotes the thing on the left and hoists it and the thing on the right into a pair object. It's an actual object type, pair, which is just like an array that always has two elements, except that you don't refer to the left and the right item as square bracket 0 and square bracket 1. You call them using the method dot key and dot value. So that's the summary. Pairs show up a lot where we use hashes. So back to where we were with hashes. I'll use that bottom initialization and I'll reformat it in a way that I only use on presentation slides, like that. How do we access part of a hash? Curly braces, arrays, square brackets, hashes, curly braces. Few differences in Perl. Again, that percent sign stays invariant. It's actually part of the variable name. And that's true whether we're talking about an entire hash or a piece of the hash or multiple pieces of the hash. It's not only easier to teach, it makes it intuitive of how to get multiple values out of a hash in one call. You just stick in multiple keys, you get multiple values out. The other difference is that the quotes around UK there are mandatory. In Perl, bare word rules allow you to drop the quotes if the key was a single word. But Raku doesn't have bare words. So the quotes are required, which would annoy every Perl 5 programmer. So they dovetailed with the word quoting syntax we already talked about. And you can do this. Now it's even better than Perl's bare word keys because it extends to more than one, as long as they're, words. Saves typing, looks neater.
Can you do double angle brackets there too?
Will you try it and tell us? The question is, can you use double angle brackets there? I bet so. I strongly suspect, but my memory is imperfect. So I think that's a nice thing for you to volunteer to tell us. I will go ahead to say, for the generic case, you do still need the curlies. I mean, that is the right thing to do unless you are using cool abbreviations here. If it was in a scalar, then I'd need to use curly braces. What do you say, Devin? Still trying, okay. Because if what Devin's trying works, and you can use doubled angle brackets, then you can use that, because one of the things double angle brackets does, besides quote single words, besides allow you to have single quotes in, is allow interpolation. So that would work with double quotes if what he's trying, with double angles. Okay, now I have to try it. it's not going to let me copy and paste. It works. I believe you. I absolutely do. But now I'm halfway through typing, so.
That's what I said.
Yeah, that does work.
Well, I tried with the quotes there.
I don't know what you mean by with the quotes.
Can you see this?
Almost well enough, but not really. Sorry.
Very bottom.
I know where you meant. Please show me later. Thanks.
I just did one with the space in the key, and then the single quotes are on the key, inside the bell line brackets.
Okay, hold on.
That works.
So, wait, what was I about to do? Oh, Z. That works. And so like that.
Yeah. But you can have space in there too. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Inside the quotes, I mean. Like the United Kingdom example.
What?
When I was there.
No, you can't.
Well,
United Kingdom.
If you have a key.
I did United Kingdom versus UK.
Okay, yeah, if there's a key, yeah. I don't have a key defined. I believe you though.
That was an auto-verification, right? There wasn't.
No, it won't auto-vivify.
Oh, it's just saying it.
It's an implied one.
By the way, the question was about asserting that it auto-vivified. There's a Perl Monks post under my name from years ago called I think it's called the 2 hashes. It talks about auto-vivification because in Perl and here, it doesn't quite work the way everybody thinks it does. There's 2 layers, and people get confused about auto-vivification. It doesn't happen if you're trying to access just like a single level. If you're getting multiple levels of hash, then it auto-vivifies far enough that it can do the final access you're asking about. But that's it. Obviously, I took the time to explain it well there. It's my top post of all time. So, but I don't have a link here for you because I didn't know you were going to ask that. Okay, moving on. Did I get distracted? Okay, this is something I promise I will not go into, partly because Sarah's saying 5 minutes. By the way, after that 5 minutes, there'll be a break, and then we're coming back for just a final 30 minutes, which I understand if you don't come back for that 30 minutes, but I'd love for you to, and I'll be taking questions during that break. Okay, very briefly, in Perl, you have exists and delete to ask, is this already in the hash? I don't need to know what its value is in the hash, but is the key in the hash? In fact, don't tell me what the value is in the hash because that might be confusing. It might have undef as its value. And then how would you tell what you were looking at? So just tell me, is it in the hash? And delete is to remove a key from a hash with its value. And it just works wonderfully in Perl, and it does not make any sense. If you actually look at the syntax, it shouldn't work. They're cheating like crazy under the covers to make that work the way everybody thinks it ought to work. See me at the bar, I'll explain it. So we have much more regular syntax in Raku, and we can't cheat like that. So we've talked about nouns and verbs. We actually have adverbs. One of the design rules of Raku was Larry gets the colon. It's like a third of all the RFCs that came in was using the colon character for something, and like everybody wanted the colon. So they designed a design rule. Larry gets the colon because he had this idea about adverbs, and they get used in some really cool places. I'm not going to get to show you because don't have time for the cool stuff. But this is the first one you run into. Instead of calling an exists function or an exists method, you put colon exists and an adverb. What does an adverb do? It modifies a verb. So the action that we're taking is accessing the UK key in capitals. We're going to modify that action. Instead of accessing the value, we're going to ask about the presence of the key. So exists is an adverb that is modifying the access. That lets us still keep our regular syntax, just add the adverb. And delete is just the same. And like in Perl, delete, some people don't know, delete in Perl returns the value that that key used to have, which is occasionally useful.
If you do nesting hashes, or does it auto file way down to the last one? When you ask for exists, stop.
If you, okay. Yes, thanks. I'm going to repeat the question. The question is again about auto-vivification. If you are just doing exists, does it auto-vivify all the way down to the point that it has to look for the exists if you're talking about multiple yeah, hashes of hashes of hashes. Thank you. Yes. Well, let me be completely clear. In Perl, yes, absolutely, and that's part of my post. Because people think you can't possibly have that happen with exists. Oh, yes, you can, if you're using enough levels. In Raku, I assume so. I haven't tried it. If you want to try it during the break, I would love to know. Okay, trying to quickly wrap up this section. You can ask a hash to list only its keys or its values. Or if you say dot pairs, it will give you the pair. So this is a list of two items. This is a pair and that is a pair. So I get two things out of it. If I say dot .kv, that's asking for key value flat. I've got 4 elements there, which you would think, why would you do that? Well, when we get to iteration, it'll come clear why that's valuable. 1 minute. Okay, 1 minute. We already answered that. What happens if you declare a key in a variable and then put it in angle brackets? What do you think will happen? I don't really care about assigning there. It's not valuable enough. And what happens if you use any of these on an array? Let me just go ahead and tell you. Pardon? Okay. Because you can do this in Perl too. And I keep getting people telling me, oh, like, did you just add this? No, it was like in 5.10. And then they didn't get it documented for 3 years. If you ask for values of an array, you just get what you would ask for in the array. Just here are all the values. If you ask for the keys, you get 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, on however many you got. Because if you think about it, those are the keys of an array. We don't think of it as a key, but that's what it is. So that makes sense. If you say, I've changed so much code from, in Perl, from 0 to, what is it, $hash array name to just keys array name. And it works. It's great. Not going to repeat that because I only half heard it, but I know what you mean. And these do what you would think. KV gives you a flat 0 first element, 1 second element, 2 third element. And pairs gives you a pair of 0 in the first element and then 1 in the second element, which aren't so useful in Perl, but, well, they don't have that in Perl, but both of those you will use over the course of using Raku. Oh, and we have real constants in Raku. You don't have to say use constant with something crazy. Thank you, Sarah. We're supposed to be on break. Hold on. And if you are used to embedding any of these three in your Perl code, we already have you covered. They're built in Raku. I'm still doing it. Raku. Pardon?
As long as you can use Unicode.
No, those are the Unicode versions over there, and those are the ASCII versions there. Oh, you did e to the I pi minus 1 equals 0? And it worked?
I'm not surprised.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not surprised,
That's that specific.
but I'm impressed. That's great. Okay, that is a great place for the break. And I may skip over interpolation when we get back in order to do like a minute on I/O and then get into some interesting flow control. Because I think that's the point where you'll be able to just fly. But then there's also other cool stuff we could talk about. All right, thanks. I'll answer questions during the break. Okay, if you do.
I just tried to get to the IPi and it gave me -1 plus 1.2 blah, 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 B minus 69.
So then something here is doing a float math instead of doing
Apparently. It's close.
the interpreter I was trying.
It's rounding. There's a rounding error here is what you're getting, right?
Yeah, that's all it is. It's something-
But why is it going to float? I guess is the question. I guess it may have to.
Well, it shouldn't.
It's, pi is not irrational. It's irrational, so
It's irrational.
then we would have to special case it, wouldn't it?
Yes, it would have to. Well, no, not necessarily because this is actually a trig identity. It's just that it really wants to have.
But it's not a rational number. How's it a trig identity goes in complex numbers? I thought trig was all.
Trig is complex. Yeah, if you actually look at the trig stuff, it all works perfectly. It's basically you just start with thank you everything, polar notation. But yeah, if anything ever does a convert to a float, it's all just gonna fall apart.
Okay, Bruce, what do you expect from this one?
Yeah.
What do you think?
I've been to a Perl conference and seen you once, but I don't think that's really.
What? What do you think of this one? Interpolating the expressions.
I didn't know that would work.
I wasn't sure it was going to work inside the double angle brackets as a subscripting operator, but it does.
Yeah. But then, you know, we use the angle brackets so that you don't have to, so you don't have to quote words and you don't have to use the curlies. You never use the curlies anyways. But you're just showing off, so.
I was just experimenting to see
Yeah.
what it did. That could be inside a list of other keys, right? So,
By the way, the key function previously, the key to the file, easy icon. Was there an error in that?
it just stayed kind of running here. The real side was correct. The imaginary side had a running here.
You got right.
Yeah, because it's,
Yes.
running it through the trig functions, and those are probably, approximation for those. Not, use, the complex.
Yes, I mean, it'll be available for.
Normally you would just. Right. Which maybe that's why, it may not have a.
This is a delightful problem to have. Have 3 attendees that aren't coming in from the hallway because they're out talking to each other about Raku. Yeah. Too busy talking about Raku to learn about Raku. Mike, do you know if the 3 men who are to your left are anywhere in sight? I'd love to get them back in before I start back. Hey, Sarah, if people will let you, would you just walk around the room and like write down everybody's name? Everybody's name, yeah, because I got a picture, but a good point. Alton Brown would say, I've secured my lovely beverage. Okay, I'll just quickly get back started with the only part of interpolation that I'm going to cover right now. Is that showing? Yeah. We talked about single quotes, basically don't do anything. Double quotes have the advantage that they interpolate. So you can put a scalar and it just puts in the contents of the scalar. There's a lot more complex stuff it can do too. I won't go into all the rules because I don't use any of them. Practically nobody uses them, except Jonathan when he wrote some of the slides I'm skipping. Because there's a generic rule that if you're using double quoted strings, you can run any code inside curlies.
That's just wildly powerful, so why mess with nothing else?
Yes, yes. Is anybody offended by the concept of this? We got a lot of flack about this. That people can do just anything they want in strings. I mean, it's a maintenance nightmare. Devin thinks it's awesome.
JavaScript does it with backwards.
JavaScript does what?
With backwards.
With back quotes. Okay.
And that's not like a string eval or anything like that, right? Performance is just fine.
Right. It's not string eval. Performance is fine. It's in fact, I don't know if we're going to get there, but it is when we learn subroutines, it's actually a code block. I mean, it really is a code block. Well, you can. That's what I was about. No, you can really do it. Ever? You can totally do this in Perl 5. Here's the syntax. I can't run it here.
You can turn it into a reference.
Yeah. You just say, no, that's.
That's a kludge to make it look like it's doing it when it's really not.
Except it is really doing it.
Yeah, well, it's really doing it and creating an anonymous array and dereferencing at the same time, which is totally unnecessary for the purpose.
Oh, you want to talk totally unnecessary? It's a whole exercise.
I'm saying I want an actual expression evaluation in there, and the braces are a pretty obvious way to do it. See, now you're doing it as an array reference though.
Okay,
And I know that trick. Plus you can do it with a scalar reference if you really want to.
so you already know that trick. Does everybody else know this trick, that you can do this in Perl? I mean, don't. Absolutely don't, but you can. So-
Sometimes.
no, okay.
It's occasionally.
Life experience is different. Devin's saying it's nice sometimes, and I'm saying, instead of saying I completely disagree, I'll say I have never seen it in Perl where it's
Now,
okay.
The scalar version of that would be $, open brace, backslash, maybe paren, expression. But
Yeah,
why bother?
right.
This at least looks a little bit more.
I even don't know if that works all the way back to before 5.5.
What's more interesting on the Raku side is that the quote, I don't know if you mentioned this earlier, the quote is actually a separate language within
Yeah.
Raku. So you have a main language that the parser goes to, and it hits that quote. It actually switches the parser language to the Q language.
Yeah, we haven't gone into that.
But then when you hit the regex, right, you got your slash in there, then it switches the language again to the regex language, and then you hit the brace, then it switches you back to the main language. And so
All that really means they don't
like
have parser that
It's grammars all the way down.
Yeah.
Tomorrow, by the way.
So that single quote and double quote is actually a quoting language that you can invoke piecemeal. You can say, I want double quotes, but don't let curly's work in it. And it's just like put a colon bang C on it or something like that. It's really powerful, and you rarely need it, but it's like I was saying earlier, when you do need it, holy cow, it's just great that you have it because it just fits. Okay, I/O. You're doing the basics. You don't need a lot of depth to it. Say, this is not my slide, but say is going to print to standard out and a new line. And it does something else I'll tell you in a second. Put does the same thing. Goes to standard out, new line. There's a difference I'll tell you in a second. Note goes to standard error. It's like we used to do warn, except it doesn't put anything else after it, which can be nice sometimes. And prompt, like Damian Conway's IO prompt, is built in to get from standard in. You will run into occasionally say versus put. Say, if what it's trying to say is not already a string, it will try to call a method called gist on it. Like, what's the gist of the argument? And that method call is supposed to return something that is humanly understandable. Like, if you create an object type and what the default stringification looks like isn't informative enough, you can create your own method and say, this is what it should look like if somebody says say to it. Say invokes gist. Put stringifies instead. And some things, that's a significant difference between stringification and running gist on it. Like I was talking about the single and double quotes, there is philosophical differences. I know Raku programmers who always use put in Rosetta Code and the weekly challenge. By the way, if you're not on the weekly challenge, you should at least start reading other people's stuff, even if you don't have time to participate yourself. But you should participate yourself. It's a good exercise. And you can learn other languages that way. Mm-hmm. No, I don't know if Damien, okay, the answer is, the statement was, the nice thing about Rosetta Code is a lot of the Raku solutions were written by people like Larry and Damien. I don't know if Damien has written any of them, but Larry wrote about, okay. It is amazing that, but I have to pack in. We've gotten clearance to go up to 15 minutes over, but that will be according to what y'all want to do. But to go on Rosetta Code, Larry wrote about a third of it, and I wrote about a third of it, and I think ThunderNat has written about a third. And that used to be a game for me, is to write my solution and then hold my breath for a day to see, because I would just spend hours on it to get it absolutely perfect. You cannot express what the solution to this problem any better than what I have just said. Within 24 hours, Larry Wall's like, oh, you didn't know about this. It's like, awesome. I learned something. It's awesome every time, but it was nail biting. Okay, so that's all standard in, standard out, standard error. What it doesn't say here, I'll flip over here to show you, is you need this shortcut. We have that was Perl. We have open and close and read and seek and tell and all that stuff, and you may need it. In fact, in full programs, you probably want it. But the shortcut that gets used so much is if you already have in a variable a file name, like that, no, my. So F holds the name of the file that I want to read. I told you can call .stir instead of putting a tilde in front, or .int instead of, actually, they're not exactly the same. I said you can call .int instead of putting a plus sign in front. Technically, you should call .numeric instead, and that's the same thing as putting a plus sign in front. Anyway, all that aside, you put a type name, you call a method that is a type name and it coerces to that type, or tries to. If I coerce F to the type IO, it turns it into an IO object. It's not open yet, but then I can say, call the lines method on it. If I do this, then I get whatever file name was in F opened and read line by line lazily into the L array. So if I only read the first three lines of, I only use the first three elements of L, it only reads the first three lines, roughly. I mean, it's not going to slurp the whole thing. We do have a slurp if you want that. Anyway, that is worth 10 slides. Just that, that's what you need if you're playing with I. Yeah, if you ask how many elements are in it, it's going to have to read it. Yeah. Yeah, we've got quantum superpositions, but we don't have anything psychic designed in yet.
Yeah.
The question is, calling elms on it would require it to read. Or it might say that it may say instead, I can't give you elms on a lazy list.
Now, what if it was on a platform like, was it VMS that actually had built-in lines in the file system physically that could actually count it without reading it?
What if it was on VMS and it could
I think
give you...
VMS was one of those, wasn't it?
We have Perl on VMS. We absolutely do. I don't know. That's my short answer. Okay, moving on. We can...
There's some file systems that actually
We can...
have lines as a file system.
No, got to move on. Say it at the bar.
Yes.
Seriously, say it at the bar. Spurt is if you're, whatever you want in memory, you want to go onto disk all at once. Okay, flow control. Before we can control, we have to decide, and our big deciders are our comparators. As we've talked about a little earlier, and Mike wanted to know about the philosophy behind it, we have where it matters most in comparison, we have a complete divide between numeric comparison and string comparison. I think it's very clever that all the numeric comparison operators are symbols and all the string comparison operators are letters. So that's cool. It's about the action that you're taking has to be clear to the reader. Your action's more important than the type. Occasionally, that's not what you want. But we have generics for that I'm not going into. Skip. Okay, we're not actually going to try this, but if I, whoa, Where's my pointer? No. I get a number. I ask the user for a number. It's there. If it's less than 0, okay, there's my comparator. It's the if statement. It does not have parens around it. It can. That's perfectly fine if you've used that from Perl, but we don't need them. So if it evaluates something in Boolean context, if it's true, then what's in the curlies executes. If not, then it moves on either to a else block, or there may be an intermediary else if, which gets evaluated in just the same way. Do I have a slide? No. Just for the record, there is an opposite form of if called unless, which you should be free to use. There's a linguistic thing where there are a bunch of non-English language users of Perl who every time a trainer was training them thought that was just crazy because of the way not works in their native language. When they're thinking about it in Perl, they don't want to see unless ever. And as a nod for that, while we had the option to make unless and else unless in Raku, we did not. But else were, yeah. You can say unless else. Now, related to that, the ternary that we were talking about earlier is spelled differently in Raku than it is in Perl. In Perl, it's a question mark and a colon. But what's the rule about the colon? Larry gets the colon. Also, we've been stronger about question mark meaning Boolean. We're using a single question mark as a coercion. Can't use it like that anymore. It's actually ambiguous. And not sign, that's not. So we want to use, instead of question and colon, we want question and bang. But we can't use either of them, so let's double them, because more power. So this is the general form of a ternary. Some Boolean condition that gets evaluated, double questions, something that'll happen if that was true, double bangs, the thing that will happen if it's false. We try not to use it like this, even though you can, and I have seen this kind of thing in production code. Don't use it just in place of an if, like everywhere, because it's tight, because it fits on one line, because that is confusing to people. Here's a condition, fine, and here's an action if it's less than 3. Otherwise, here's a different action. That's not a good use of this. Use a full if block for that, if and else. You want this when you are creating a value. You want something that's getting used or assigned over here somewhere. If you can see that point. Oh, I meant to resize that pointer. Have y'all not been able to see my pointer this whole time? So if this is less than 3, then something with a value, otherwise something else with a value, and then that gets assigned and we'll use the value later. That's the way to use this. For example, and unlike JavaScript and apparently some other languages, we got the precedence right. So not only can you do that for single decisions, you can do it for multiple decisions. It chains very well. Ruth said she never saw the multiple versions of the ternary. This is what she was talking about, except in Perl. So I ask about the number, and if it's less than 0, then I have the value negative. Otherwise, now, okay, this whole thing from here on evaluates. So otherwise, well, what about if this is greater than 0, that is triggering on this part, then it's positive, otherwise it's 0. So you get these stacks where you have double question marks all the way down, and double bangs all the way down except for the first one, and the question marks aren't there. And that may be confusing in this moment, but once you've done it 3 times, you will never not want to do this. It's great. And in fact, I don't even have to use S. I mean, this was nice, it's clear, Maybe my maintenance programmer will like it, but this works just as well. Okay, so that's if in two forms. Oh, this is something I was showing that was very clever that will get you killed by your maintenance programmer. Don't do that. So we also have postfix forms of several things in flow control. If is a great one. In line, I can say shout if you need something. The if comes after some bit of code. So it's going to execute this, and then if this gives you a true value, then this executes, which sounds backwards when I say it out loud, but linguistically, shout if you need something, bang, that's it. Make this assignment if this is true. Say it's alive unless it's not alive. No, sorry. Try that again. Say it's alive unless it's not alive. And warn printer and fire unless the printer printed. 5 minutes to go before we make a decision on how far we're going to go. And that's an ancient joke. Ask me at the bar. Okay, this happens a lot, and it's going to relate to something we'll get to later, hopefully. In Perl and other languages, you get something, and the interface, the return value of this function returns false when it doesn't work. Okay, you ask for this person's user ID, that's not a valid user ID. You get a blank or a 0 or something false back. Lots of functions do this. So immediately afterwards, you condition on that value. And that's like, don't repeat yourself, I'm repeating myself. And another downside to this, besides repeating myself, is name stays in scope for the rest of the block. However many millions of lines it might be, name is something you cognitively have to worry about. So we'd like to limit the scope on it. So in Perl and some other languages, you do this kind of thing. My name. So basically that whole call in the parenthesis of an if, which may look a little complicated, but that works. That does exactly what you want. Name is only scoped in here. Past there, it doesn't exist. And in C, this is a real problem. They do this all the time in C, and the equals, because, see, we do double equals there all the time, right? Is this equal to 5? And putting a regular equal when there is a variable over there where you needed a double equal is a common bug. So we kind of a little bit aren't crazy about this. In fact, they have special syntax in C for it. Also, like I was saying about special casing exists and delete, it doesn't actually, it just works the way you want and not the way that makes any sense at all in Perl. This should not be out of scope because name was not declared inside the parens. Inside the curly braces. And that's where the scope lives, right? People don't think about this, but this is not supposed to work. Larry just made it work because everybody wants it to work that way. But it doesn't make any sense. It's just so useful. So, new piece of syntax. An if block can take an arrow parameter. And whatever is here gets put in there. And if what's in there is true, then the block executes and can get access to name. And if name was not true, then the block does not execute. In fact, the aliasing doesn't happen. And I don't know if I've got, oh yeah. So, and I don't put a my there because this is not a lexical variable. That's the way they get around this whole thing of, well, that's not in the right place. That's not a lexical variable. That's an alias. It's a read-only alias. It's more efficient than a lexical variable, and it works here. So if you've got exactly that situation, then you use the arrow variable syntax, which you might think, that is pretty uncommon, and I probably won't use that. Well, you might not, but we use the arrow sub, arrow variable syntax in a bunch of other places too.
It's just that it works on any block, right?
Shh. He said it works on any block, but we're not saying that yet. But yes, it does. I might not have time to. Sarah says we've got 1 minute left, so let's go ahead and have this conversation. We got all that left on flow control. Ooh, fancy. Oh, got my favorite slide and ranges and and we just added in at a time to Perl, so that was my bonus because it's a Perl conference and KV. And so, what do you want to do? Do you want to just take this time to ask questions that you've been holding until the next question asking time? Or do you want me to go on with the stuff that I haven't? Or do you want me to skip forward from all the stuff I was going to do and go to the block of stuff I can talk on for 15 minutes if we completely get through all this material? Those of you who want to...
30 minutes until...
Yes, it's 30 minutes to lightning talk. The cardinal sin of this conference is missing lightning talks. That you cannot miss the lightning talks. It's the most important thing all the time. So I want you to at least have 15 minutes. We've got 15 minutes to optionally to go. What?
Who cares about the real talks? Just the lightning talks.
Yeah, sometimes just lightning talks. So you just call out. What do you want? If what you want is to leave for the next 15 minutes, you have a 30-minute break. Just go ahead and go, and I'm really glad you stuck with me. But if you want something else, then stay here and tell me what you want. It's a little louder.
A knowledge dump from Bruce.
A knowledge dump on Bruce. But on what?
On whatever you can get through in the next 16 minutes.
Okay, I got knowledge dump. Sarah, did you get these gentlemen's name? Great. Guys, I haven't gotten to speak to you individually, but I hope to, maybe at the VIP mixer. I'm really glad you're here. I see you packing up. That's why I'm saying that. Okay. All right. So how about I just go through this at an insane speed so you see what I was going to do. We've got given, which uses smart matching behind the scenes, which works in Raku. I know in Perl, we're like, oh, what do we do? But that's because Perl doesn't have types. Everything that's wrong about smart matching in Perl is because Perl is untyped. So again, we've got the magic whatever star that I'm not prepared to explain, but it works. Given whatever is here between here and the prompt goes into the topic variable, $_, which I have not addressed yet, but it is magic. And I don't know if I'll get to it. The reason it's so much more magical and ubiquitous in Raku is if you just say, that dot cars, not $f.cars, but just dot cars. Dot by itself is a method call on $_. You're calling it on the topic. So things that automatically assign, we'll get into for loops automatically assigned to $_. It's a dovetail. It works really, really well together. Where was I? So given also assigns stuff to $_. So when I do star here, it's talking about $_. And we've got a default block. Loop, I wanted y'all to try this because it's funny. In Perl, we would say while with one in parenthesis. And that would give you an infinite loop, which you need sometimes. You'll break out of it in the middle of it on some condition, but sometimes you don't want the condition to be at the top or bottom. You want to only break out in the middle. So you'd say while one, and we just say loop here. Would you try that? Those of you who still have quick access. And remember, Control-C gets you out. And that's print, not say. Yeah, it's a hangover. So when Commodore 64 personal computers hit the store shelves, every retailer set up demonstration model, and every one of them booted directly to a basic interpreter. So this happened everywhere. Not that I did it more than 20 times. So that's infinite loop. It's also the structure for the C-style loop. If you don't put parens here and you just say loop, it's infinite. But if you put parens and double semicolons, then it's the C-style loop. And it's not named for anymore, so we don't confuse it with the other four. So that's a great name change. So loop is for infinite loops or the C-style loop. But you can do better, usually. While loops are unsurprising, and until, just we have if and unless, we have while and until. I think we do in Perl too. Sometimes it's more natural. And while, just like if, there's our arrow into a variable that will only exist inside that block, an alias. And that
Is that arrow, you said it makes it immutable?
it defaults to read only. I don't call it immutable. I call it read only because it's an alias. So it's I can't speak articulately. What?
It's immutable through that alias.
Yes, it's not mutable through the alias. It's not changeable, not writable.
Like $$T:\RW there or something?
Well, there is a way. The question is about this being still a read-only alias, and knowing that there has to be syntax to make it read-write. But it wouldn't make any sense to make it read-write here because, I mean, there's a way to say is copy, to say you're making a copy of it and you can change the copy, but it doesn't change the original. But it's sort of like my old thing about this. If I say, okay,
That's the postfix.
yeah, it's because it was postfix instead of prefix. But so now it has 4 in it, right? And that whatever it had in it, that was a sensible thing to do, to say add 1 to whatever value is in A. That's sensible. What does that mean? It means change the value of 3 to the value of 4 in the entire universe. It's nonsensical. And when we start aliasing, can't you do that in Ruby? That's cute. So the reason that's relevant is, what if this isn't something that is changeable? What if you say, instead of loop, you say while 1 or while 3 and assign it to t and then try and change it? Well, you're not changing the thing that's holding the 3. You're trying to change the value of 3. So that makes more sense in a for loop. That's my caution about it. Okay, replace that with something better. There's a for loop. Again, we got this, read-only alias. If you want,
CLC instead of UCLC.
talk to Larry.
Where does T?
I can say is read-write. This is something called a trait. You'll see it again. A trait is assigns an additional property to something. Those properties are called traits. RW is a trait. So it gets assigned to task, and now this alias allows you to write to it. And if I'm not writing to it now, but if I did make a change to task, it would actually change whichever one of this array elements I was on right then. And there is an abbreviation for that, very clever. I blame Damien, but I can't say it for sure. This also makes this read-write.
But you're only changing the value stored in the alias at that point.
I'm only changing the value stored in where at that point?
The alias that you created.
No. It will. It's like in Perl. It will change. It will change it in task. If you,
By
if,
reference, right?
if
Not
you,
like a copy and then copy back.
right, it is by reference. Well, it's not by reference, it's an alias. You actually are
Well,
on
alias
that
is
array
the
element.
path by reference type of
Yeah.
alias.
So, yeah, if I said is copy there, copy is another trait, then what you were talking about, Mike, you would get something that is mutable, but the mutation goes away, which is convenient sometimes. Sometimes you want X to be the variable, and X is going to get changed, and you don't want to have X and then a copy of X, because that's not what the formula was in the math book. Okay, so votes. Is this simple, but it's subtle? Is it too subtle? What do you like? Speak up. Explicit. Okay, RW is explicit. That's good.
And it parallels the is copy. So
That's right. It's parallels with the is copy, like that. I loved this when I first learned it, but then maintenance programmers, which is usually me in 6 months, and I find myself not doing that much. I go with this. Okay, what if you don't alias? Got to that. It goes into $_. Is $_ a read-only alias? Oh, so I checked this because I wasn't sure, and it's really interesting. I don't have a slide for it, but if you say arrow $_, which why would you do that? But if you do, then it is a read-only alias. So you get the advantage of being able to use dot in here with the safety. By the way, the safety, that's everything. We all wish that this had defaulted to being read-only in Perl, and then give us some little tweak to make it read right, because there's just bugs of writing where you don't expect to because somebody passed you an array. Anyway, so if you say arrow $_, it's read-only. But if you don't do that, then it is read-write, which is why that works. Well, again, now that I'm saying it in public, that should be some code that changes $_, like multiplies it by 3 or something. Anyway, we can use for as postfix, and that's often useful. Used to be more useful to me to do some operation on everything in tasks this way. Nowadays, I'd use map instead, and I really hate that we did not have time to get to functional programming and map and grep and all that. Okay, why is that still there? Oh, so there's my C-style loop. I said we can do something better. Yes. Okay, those are just blue question marks. We could put, instead of this, 1 through 10, right? That'll work. That's equivalent? No, it's not. That's backwards. Need reverse 1 through 10. So I will be 10, and then it will be 9, and it will be 8, all the way down to 1, and then we'll lift off. Could have done it like that. Or like that. So what's a range? A range is an object. Atlanta Perlmongers, let me see. I forgot that I should do this, and I didn't even think that Atlanta would be in the room. So glad you're here, Mike. We ran into this like 10 years ago when we were playing with Raku. So what is the sum? You don't know that, but that's the sum of 1 to 100. Nope, 2 dots. 50-50, that's a very famous thing. So we should be able to stress this, right? We should be able to, it should get 10 times slower roughly every time we go 10 more here, right? And we could not, for the life of us, get this thing to slow down. Seriously. It's obviously cheating. How can it cheat? It can cheat. I mean, for those of you who don't know, there is a formula that Gauss figured out when he was like 8. And they gave him the problem, like busy work in class. Here, sum up all the numbers from 1 to 100. And he looked at it, wrote down 50-50, handed it in, and walked out of the room. And what he found is that if you take the numbers from 1 to 100 and you fold them in half, then you get 100 plus 1 and 99 plus 2. And so you get you get, yeah, so 50 times 101. So this is something that can easily be done. But what if what if I do that? Oh, it's still fast. You can't use that formula for that. Well, yes, you can. You do the formula from one to that huge number and then do it again for 1 to 98 and subtract them. So what's happening is the range operator, the range operator there, dot, dot, is producing a range object, and the object is getting the summation instruction, and it can override it and not do it one at a time and do something optimal.
So it's bypassing the hyperoperator to do it.
There's no it's not a hyperoperator. He says it's not bypassing, it's,
Let's say square brackets made it hyper.
no, the square brackets make it a reduction. A reduction operator is square brackets. Yeah, if Sarah says 5 minutes, and that's 5 minutes of our 15 extra minutes.
It is 4 till.
Okay,
5 more
5 more minutes, we'll have a hard,
minutes to get to
okay.
like
So in 5 minutes, we'll have a hard stop, and thank you all ahead of time, and see me at the bar sometime. I don't drink except grapefruit juice, which is damaging to me, so we'll do that. Okay, again, we're in brain dump mode. This right here is reduction syntax. Any infix operator you want to stick in there, you can stick in there, and it does, like, what are the first two things added together? Okay, that's accumulated. Now what's that and the next thing added together? What's that and the next thing added together? Which you think kind of ends with plus and maybe star to get the product. And we've got a dot sum function. So how useful is this? Well, you can say, yeah, I'm here. If I say, that'd be the minimum of the entire list, right? I can do the maximum of the entire list. I can say that, and it will say true if the list is in strict numeric order. If I want unstrict numeric order where it's okay for two things to be equal somewhere in the list, then that'll do it. It's just useful. And like I was saying about op equals, if you define you're an operator or something, you automatically get this to work, which I think is really cool. And if I'm just vectoring and not doing slides anymore, we got, nope. If I do that, I get an element from the first list, element of the second. No, let me do this. Element from the first and element of the second as a 2-element list. And then I get the next two and the next two and the next two and the next two. And if it runs out, then it just stops. The short one wins. If you want something different, hyperoperators. But the reason this is very cool is that's zip. You can use zip in Perl. It's in list util. I can put any infix operator there, and now it'll give me the first two added together, the second two added together, and so on. Any operator there automatically works. X gives me the cross product. If I've got 3 things on the left list, 3 things in the right list, I'll get 9 things total. And I can put an operator there. That is useful because sometimes you can just say on one side, one thing. And what is the cross product of a bunch of stuff and one thing? You get the same number of things you originally had in the left. So this multiplies everything in list 1 by 2. It's like a short version of map. I should probably take questions instead of keep blathering. But we've got automatically parallelizable versions of this too with the different syntax. That's worth its own talk, because now we're getting into cool stuff instead of beginner stuff. But hopefully I've tempted you enough to experiment. Questions? Okay, sorry. Is there a special way of describing something about prime numbers? Yes. The first what primes? We haven't gotten into lazy lists or grep, but we do have a is prime function built in. So if I say, I do this all the time in the weekly challenge. For grep, for those of you who know it, if you already have a function, you don't have to put it in curly braces. You can just refer to it with its noun form. Ampersand in front of a subroutine means it's by name instead of invoking it directly. And so there are my primes. It's a lazy list. And when I ask for the 8th one, it will automatically generate the first 7 and give me the 8th one too, and cache them. It's really nice. It's very efficient. I mean, if you don't do something crazy, and that's actually what I do is this, and I like to joke. That's a short form of range that means it's the equivalent of. I didn't get to cover the cat ears. You can put a cat ear on either side to say exclude the endpoint, which gives us the best of both worlds without falling in the Python hole of why does it work that way. So this goes from 0 all the way up to, but not including infinity. No. Because then if I wanted to include infinity, I could like that. But what I want to do is say it like that. Okay, so that's a hard stop. I hope this was helpful to y'all. I'd love to I'd love to get email from all of you and talk to you later. And there are more Raku talks later in the conference. Let me know how I can help. Thank you.